it is very possible that, and this is just speculation, that Cain was very possibly the favored. And in that favored status, when it came time for faith in the Lord, he perhaps was self-centered and self-focused because that's what he had been taught by his mother's reaction. Just speculation, just something that's interesting down the line. Okay, so it goes on in the verse. It says, by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. And again, the reason Abel's sacrifice was acceptable is that what he brought was by faith. His focus was on God and worshiping and not something he was bringing out of his efforts. Whereas Cain didn't bring it by faith, through which he was commended. Abel was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And through his faith, through Abel's faith, it says, though he died, he still speaks. Now, this is an amazing truth that I want you to think about, because right after this happened, right after Abel's sacrifice was accepted and Cain's was rejected, Cain's countenance fell. God tried to counsel him. He would hear nothing of it. I take it pretty soon afterward, he found Abel in the field and killed him. Now, if Abel was the righteous one and Abel brought the right sacrifices, God could have protected him from Cain killing him in the field. But he didn't. He allowed Abel, the one who had brought the right sacrifice, to be murdered by his brother. But then God says a very powerful, or the writer here says a very powerful thing. Though he died, though he was murdered, his life was cut short. He, in his grave, that message of his faith still speaks to people's heart and still speaks to Cain probably after this point. I think of that missionary, the name escapes me, the missionary who went with his men down to an area where cannibals were, and South America, and he was attacked and killed. All of them were killed. They were trying to share the gospel with cannibals, and they killed all of them. Jim Elliot. And it's a beautiful story. Later on, his wife went down and won those people to Christ. And there's a great picture of her giving a haircut to the chief, because that's what you do. People get saved, they get haircuts, right? I don't know why she was cutting his hair, but anyway, but she's cutting the hair of the chief of the tribe who killed her husband. Jim Elliot's life was, in our mind, cut short, and yet he still speaks. His testimony still reverberates beyond the grave. If you want something to live beyond the grave, if you want something to live for Christ, and your life will continue to communicate. This also shows in Genesis the degree of sin that the very first brothers, one killed the other. This blows out of the water the idea of the effect of environment upon us. Because we're born sinners. We're born in Adam, and we don't need environment to make us worse. And so a lot of times it does. Environments do influence us, but environments don't make murderers, because Cain's only environment was his mother and father. There were no other people. And so sin caused him to murder right out of the gate of humanity. Okay? Right out of the gate of humanity. So it says, and I see Ed there. Hey, Ed. I see, so commending him by accepting his gift through faith, though he's dead, he speaks. Now, let's spend a few minutes with verse 5 and the next Old Testament saint. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. It's great. By the way, there are two Old Testament prophets who did not die. I just gave you one,
Elijah.
for 500 points. Who was the other Old Testament saint that then never saw death?
Started with a J.
J.
Elijah.
J-
Oh, Sid.
oh,
Sid,
wait a minute. Ezekiel and Elijah. Elisha.
Elijah, there you go. You had the J, but the J was further into the word. So, Elijah. Yeah, Elijah and Enoch. And it's a great story. I mean, he's out there walking with the Lord, and all of a sudden, and I've heard this over the years, preachers say, he's out walking with the Lord and have such a nice conversation. And the Lord, looked down and said, why don't you just come on home? We're just having such a good time. And he said, okay. And up he went. And so, but he was not found. They looked for him. They couldn't find him. And the Lord translated and took him up. It's kind of a picture of the rapture. He was taken up so that he should not see death. Now, this is in contrast to Abel, who saw death in faith, and yet Enoch didn't see death. Kind of a picture how God treats all of us completely different in faith and has a different path. Some of us someday may end up being martyrs or in jail, and so some may not. And so whatever path, it's all different. And so we can't kind of relate to other. So verse 5, by faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him up. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. This is the second statement that the writer of Hebrews gives that refutes the whole Jewish teaching that by the obedience to the law, the commendation comes. Because this is way before the law was ever given. Way before the law was given, Enoch pleased God. Verse 6. And without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must do two things. Must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who seek him. Now, I want you to look at the two phrases at the end of verse 6. And I want you to think deeply about what these phrases mean and what they don't mean. Always ask yourself a million questions when you're studying. So without faith, it's impossible to please him.
Mhm.
Faith is what pleases him, not obedience to a command. Remember, obedience is a reaction to faith. It's not about obedience. It's never about obedience. It's about belief. Because those who believe, like a knee-jerk reaction, will always obey. So if you want to draw nigh to God, two things. What does it mean when it says you must believe that he exists? Well, what do you think it doesn't mean? Any thoughts?
No, I'm not sure about what it doesn't mean. I mean,
It's deeper than just believing that he exists.
okay, let me try for doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that you just believe that there's some being out there that, exists and that is not omnipotent, is not, the creator of heaven and earth. It's just some thing out there. That's not what it means.
Right.
What it means is to believe, that he is the God of the universe who created all things, and that, he is in control of all things, and that he is the one true God, not just, a pluralism God or little g God, whatever, universalism, whatever you want him to be.
Right. Right. Yeah, it can't mean just, I believe, because I'm telling you, almost 10 people out of 10 are going to tell you, I believe God exists.
Right.
It has to be something so much deeper. So in our lives, when we say that we believe God exists, it's the fullness and depth of everything you can. It's all that he said about himself. And if the Bible is true, he is the center of all things. And so this idea of faith to believe that he exists means that to believe that apart from him, nothing exists. And that he is everything. He's the center spoke of everything. And he's what we think about. He's what we talk about. He guides every discussion and value point to us. There was something on the TV last night. Oh, I know what it is. It'll come up with that. It says, in the midst of a crisis, where do we turn? Every commercial now is you know what. So in the midst of a crisis, when everything falls apart, who do we turn to? Well, you and I know what should come next. This is the word that came next. Are you ready? Scientists. We turn to science. Okay. We believe God exists. Now, I want the scientists to give us a vaccine. I'm not discounting their efforts and what they're doing and all, but when you turn to the Lord, if the Lord is the center of the existence of your life. So this is the whole deal right there. So we believe he exists and that he rewards those. What's the word?
Diligently seek him.
Seek him. Notice, not serve him. He's not a rewarder of those who serve him. Because that's what I was taught for 20 years. He's a rewarder of those who seek him. Notice it doesn't say seek what he'll do for you. See that? Seek him to be all of your life. Okay? All right. Any comments on that? That's a powerful verse, and I mean, you ought to memorize that deal. And so, but any comments on that verse before we move to the next guy?
I really like, the phrase, and not even the reward part of it, but just seeking him. There's so much peace and comfort in that. And that, to me, if you seek after an individual, someone, you're desiring to be in that person's presence. Yeah. You're seeking to be, with that person, and it's just just the thought that, that God who created heaven and earth, wants us to seek him out and hang out with him.
Yeah.
That to me, just those two words, means so much. To seek him is more than just, and part of it is I want to know more about him and things like that, or not even just, to try to study something to understand it better, but to seek to be in the presence of God, to desire to be in the presence of God.
Yeah. And I think of Abram when Lot chose the good land and he turned and Abram went and took the rest of it. He let Lot take what he wanted and he picked Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abram turned back, to the other part, which was beautiful, but it wasn't Sodom and Gomorrah, or at least prosperity, if you will. And then coming back from the battle where Abram had killed all those kings, the king of Sodom shows up, and years later, and he shows up after the slaughter of the kings, and he tries to reward Abram.
Mm-hmm.
Tries to give him a whole bunch of stuff. Abram said, "I want nothing from you."
Right.
And right after he leaves is that great statement of Abram that God is my exceeding and abundant reward. The reward is him. That's what we're talking about there. All right. So verse 7. Let's do one more guy. At least begin, because I got some numbers in my mind I got to get off because I'll forget them next week. Mm-hmm. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen. What are the events as yet unseen? If you know the story and you know the events, Karen, what do you think?
The flood.
All right, he's referring to the flood. Well, why would that be an event yet unseen?
Because they were primarily in the desert and they had never seen rain before.
Exactly, John. I'd like to see your face is what I'd like to see. Is there a reason
It's back up. I had dinner just now.
Your face is what you're doing. That's what you're doing there.
That's what I did. Yep.
All right. That's fine. You don't have to show me your face. Yeah, they'd never seen rain. There had never been a drop of rain. What watered the earth was the dew, because there was a kind of a crystal covering over the earth that's believed that protected men from the sun. That's why they lived so long back then. The harmful rays of the sun couldn't get through that deal. And it says a mist came up and then dropped back down. And this is how it was watered. They'd never seen rain. And so we're going to begin to see here a reoccurring theme. And the reoccurring theme here with all these people is by faith. It always begins by faith. And then they did something that was commanded by the Lord. Okay? This is the beginning, verse 7, of Noah, the first one, who were given commands of things to do. And the obedience to build an ark came out of a belief that what God said was going to happen. So there's this reoccurring theme of all these Old Testament saints is that, number one, they got a word from the Lord to do something. Number two, they believed the Lord. Number three, they stepped out and did it. So this is the reoccurring theme. They had a command, they had a word from the Lord, and in this case, Noah was to build an ark for a flood. They believed that, and then he went and did it. That's the reoccurring sequence we're going to see over and over again. Now look at verse 7. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events in reverent fear, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. Now, let me do the little math thing because I find this fascinating. Noah had a grandfather. Noah's grandfather was a man named Methuselah. Okay? Methuselah was the son of, Karen said something and got my mind.
okay.
Enoch. Enoch had a son named Methuselah. Okay? Methuselah had a son named Lamech. Lamech had a son named Noah. Okay? Does anybody know what when you think of Methuselah, what do you know? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Oldest man in the Bible.
How many years, Ed?
964.
Oh man, you're so close. Add 5 more years.
969. I know I was pretty close. I knew it was 960 something.
All right. If you go back in Genesis and do the math, okay? See the numbers. All right, you just got to go back and do the math. There's 182 years. I think Methuselah was 182 or 187 when he had Lamech. Lamech was 182 or 187 when he had Noah. But Methuselah was 600 years old before he had, go back to the math. This is how it works out. You got 600 years old. Let me just turn to it. Hold on. Let me not butcher it all to pieces. All right. Are you ready? Methuselah, back in chapter 5 of Genesis, when Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years. I had sons and daughters, and all the days of Methuselah was 969. So Lamech lived 182 years and fathered a son, and that was Noah. If you do the math, of when Methuselah died at 969, it was the very year that the flood came in Noah's day. Now, there's a couple things that I find interesting there. Number one, I find that Noah, his grandfather, died before the flood came. I hate numbers, man. They get all messed up. If you go back and do the math, trust me, it'll all work out. Okay. You know what? I'm going to write that down next week. So in fact, I'm going to hold up a little whiteboard that shows the numbers. But anyway, take my word for it, and I'll show it to you next Wednesday night. Two things, and we'll kind of end with this. Two things. Number one, Noah's grandfather died before the flood came. That's kindness to Noah. If you got a grandfather, that's kind that he would die before the flood came. But there's a spiritual application of that. Anybody got a thought of what a spiritual application might be with that story?
Oh, yeah.
Remember, as Ed said, Methuselah lived longer than any human being. And when he died, judgment came. What does that tell you about God's character, God's justice, and judgment? Anyone?
Really patient with us.
Can you repeat that, Dad?
Yeah. Noah, the year that Noah died, the year that Methuselah died, the flood came. He was 969. He lived longer than any man. And when he died, that's when judgment came. What does that tell you about the Lord?
Well, I'm trying to look at it from which side. Did he allow Methuselah to live to the point of seeing that he would judge the earth? Or did he end Methuselah's life before he judged the earth? Which side of the coin? I mean, there's two sides to that coin.
Yeah. I take it that he died before the judgment came. I really don't, because if he was alive when judgment came, Ed, Noah would have got him into the ark.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But on that side of it, what I'm saying is did God allow him to live to see Noah build the ark and know that his judgment was coming? And then, it's kind of, you could look at it on either side, but on the other side of it, of him dying before the flood came, I guess I struggle more with that side of it than I do the other side of it.
Yeah, now certainly for Methuselah, having lived 969 years in an extremely wicked world, it must have been great satisfaction to have his grandson obey God, build an ark, be made fun of for it, and know in your heart that judgment is coming and that God is going to do something. So that's very sad. I mean, there's no greater satisfaction in life than that your children and grandchildren walk in faith. There's nothing that is even close to equal to that. Okay. And so from Methuselah's, it must have been very satisfying. But what I'm asking is, from God's perspective, what does that tell you about the character of God in sending judgment? If he waited until the man who lived longer than any other man died before he sent it.
I think it shows how merciful he is and how much he loves us.
Yeah, his long suffering. Romans 2:4 says, or do you show contempt for the riches of his kindness, forbearance, and patience, not realizing that God's kindness is intended to lead you to repentance? So the Lord is long suffering and kind that he waited 969 years before he sent the judgment. And I never thought about the angle that Ed brought up about Methuselah himself being able to see his grandson take such a tremendous step of faith. That must have been very satisfying to him. But it's God who sent the flood. And so God chose when to send a flood, and God waited until the longest man who ever lived lived it out. So, man, those numbers back in Genesis, and I have always done this, where I get all the numbers right in my head, then I go to teach it and preach, and they all get muddled on me. And so, have you guys got just a minute or two? A minute or two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So Methuselah had lived 187 years and fathered Lamech. All right, somebody write that down. I'm going to write it down. 187. I'm not saying that right. Lamech? Lamech.
Lamech.
Lamech. And then Methuselah lived after he fathered. So how many years is that? Well, there it is right there. There it is right there. Right there in verse 25. If you add 187 to 782, then you have 969. But that just tells you that. You have to go to another verse in chapter 6 that talks about Noah, how old Noah was when the flood came. I'm going to get it next week. We're going to work this out. Okay. All right. I'm going to let you guys go. There's one more verse that tells how old Noah was when the flood came. And if you add those numbers together, the 187, the 182, and I think it's 600, maybe, I think Noah was 600 years old.
Yes, Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came upon the earth.
There it is. You got it in two different places. So you got 187, 182, which comes to 369. You add 600 of that, it's 969. So the year that the flood came, see, I'm going to be able to sleep peacefully tonight. We figured that out. Lead you straight. Give you some bad doctrine. Okay, anybody got any closing comments? All right, those of you watching on Facebook or YouTube Live, man, join us on Zoom. Give that a shot. Give that a try. Love to see your face up here. You can throw in comments if you feel comfortable. And just like John did, if it's time to eat, you just put some picture of your high school years up there. And so there it is. There it is. Yeah. Yeah. That's where you had thicker hair, John. You had thicker hair there.
Yes.
You
No
could eat.
doubt.
You could eat with take the picture in your life, the time of life when you look.
Good chicken.
What's that?
Yeah. We had some good chicken wings tonight.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. All right. God bless you all. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Ben.
And we'll see you.
Good night, all.
Night. Hey,
Good night, everybody.
There's Kathy.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Hey, Kenneth.
Sammy! What's up, Sammy?
Kathy, were you and Bruce on there all the time?
No, we joined about 10 minutes ago. We're late.
Okay. All right.
Better late than ever.
I was too. It's okay.
All right.
Have
Hey,
a good
brother.
evening.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, Bruce. Hey, nobody.
Hey.
I don't know how to get out.
James says leave meeting. Bye.
How do you get on there?
Oh no, I'm trying to get out.
Hey, Ken. Oh, he's gone. Nope, there he is. Ken, can you hear me? You can't hear me. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. You say something. Oh, you can hear me, but I can't hear you. Is that? Yeah, take your mute off. No. take your mute off. Off. Unmute. Unmute. Join audio. Oh, hey,
Okay.
hey. Hey. All right. How you doing?
Now I got now I see where the mute was.
Now you what?
I said now I found the mute button.
Oh,
It didn't
okay.
show up before, and then it showed.
Oh, okay. Hey man, how you been? Ain't seen you in a while. Doing all right?
Yeah, I've been doing all right. Yep,
Good, good. All right. Well, miss
I'm over
you.
here with
Love.
my parents.
How's your mama doing?
And my mom.
Hey.
Hi. Sure missing church. Yeah, sure missing you all.
Missing you too.
Yeah,
That's cool.
hope this ends fast.
Yeah, you guys are outside enjoying this though, huh? Look at you. And soaking up
Yeah.
that sun. You guys are having a ball. That's good seeing you.
Yeah,
Well, I guess we
just
could
enjoy the
probably go.
weather.
We could probably go to the beach and see each other. That's where everybody's hanging out at now.
No.
No, thank you.
That's what they call them, the crazy Floridians. All the Floridians are at the beach now.
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and shut down, and we'll see you on Sunday, I guess.
Yep.
Yep.
See you Sunday.
All right. All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.